Hello, my name is Janet Lee, and I am an intern with the Bath Spa University for the summer of 2016. It's been a great experience for me, and I'd like to walk you through 2 lessons I was able to create as a result of the internship. The first lesson was called The Image of the Child, so I'll show you what I began with. This was the unit originally. So as you can see, it's very linear, lots of text. The icons were present throughout. There was an introduction with a video, readings, a lecture, part 1, and the lecture actually had the slides embedded to the upper right-hand corner of each video. And not much purposeful instruction throughout. There's part 2 of the lecture and part 3 of the lecture. After the videos, video lectures, there were lectures included using additional videos from YouTube. So Ken Robinson and also an Alanis Morissette piece. Finally, there's a conclusion by the instructor. So basically, when I met with a client, I thought of a rationale for changes I might make. Again, the linear model was suggested. I talked to my client about the lecture-based nature of this course. I talked about building purposes for viewing and how the students had limited participation. The importance of these changes had to do with modeling effective strategies, encouraging collaboration, shifting the paradigm, building inquiry, metacognition, and media literacies in her learners. So I gave 3 levels. So level 1 was basically just a very simple set of changes to make. So I would correct the order of the linear delivery, perhaps some of the grammar issues I found. I would address some of the video issues, the quality, the length, etc., and the layout. Level 2 had to do with revising the text and adding in one activity and an evaluative piece. However, level 3 included and would require adding and subtracting length of lectures, repurposing those lectures. So I told the client that I could transcribe the lectures. I could split them up into text and visually stimulating pieces. I talked about participation features and collaborative opportunities. So luckily, the client was very flexible and accepting of all of these ideas, and my mentor agreed, and so I've gone ahead and done the level 3 example of my proposal. So I'd like to show you, again, this is what I started with, and this is what's resulted. So you'll recognize the format. The session icons are still included, and there's still an introduction by the instructor. I've broadened the reading activity and talked about purposes for reading. The overview now includes an actual activity that encourages learners to leave the Minerva site in search of JPEG images that would depict themselves as children in a certain generation and also their own view of children these days in modern times. I ask that they make connections, and then I ask a metacognitive question. Throughout the lesson, learners are actually keeping track on a Word document that they'll bring back to the classroom. Remembering childhood. You'll see that there are photos here. I've transcribed most of her lecture, but I've also kept part of the lecture. So this is an example from her lecture of a time when her perception of a child was different from other points of view. Right? So this video is only 1 minute long, which is better than 6 minutes. I ask learners to deconstruct that and add their own examples for themselves. The icons follow throughout, but what is really important is setting a purpose for viewing all of this material. So I've added very explicit details, walked the learner through each step, and gradually released them into additional activities. So here's another lecture. And before viewing, during viewing, and after viewing strategies are now in place for this part 2. The Ken Robinson biographical lectures are fabulous. They're really, really good. But I felt like they were just floating in the air. So as you can see, I've included before, during, and after information for the Ken Robinson videos. And I've actually embedded them inside part 2 of the lecture. Part 3, we have a more recent and emergent view of childhood. Here's her lecture, but we've got before, during, and after strategies. I've also worked in the Ken Robinson lecture that was floating on its own at the end in the original module, but now I have included a screen capture of his website on his page on the TED website. So this page actually becomes a text that can be analyzed and looked at as something in addition to the videos. So setting a purpose for viewing, and again, learners are encouraged to record their thoughts on a divergent document. What's important in my eyes, and when I pitch this to the client, is the bridge back to the classroom. So if we come back to this document, you'll see there is a bridge. So using the template that Bath Spa University suggests for teacher candidates, I've created a lesson plan bridge. So you'll see there are learning objectives for the instructor, learning outcomes, a resource checklist, and an actual lesson plan. And this will help instructors or facilitators, anyone who decides to teach and utilize this unit called the image of the child. It allows anyone to be able to bring their learners back from that online environment back into the classroom where the collaboration can take place in a face-to-face manner. So for my second client, I was asked to choose a course that existed within a massive collection of material that was basically dumped into a file in preparation for an instructional designer to come in and make a difference with the material. So after looking through all of the topics, I settled on differentiation. A reason I picked differentiation was because I felt that teachers really need to have an experience with differentiated instruction, and an online experience would accomplish several things. It would allow teachers to feel what it's like to gather resources on the internet, resources that are open and free, but also it would give them an example of how differentiation works really well when we are using Web 2.0 tools. So if you'll have a look, this is what I began with. This is just a PowerPoint. And you'll see it's very black and white, and begins with a definition of differentiation instead of beginning with an actual experience. So my pitch to the client was to flip the lesson, and here is the document that I pitched to the client to begin with. When you flip a lesson, you think about the lesson being about you, not about the student, not about the instructor. When lesson plans are usually this way, where it's bottom heavy, the students arrive in a classroom, you give them the material, and then in the end, they have an understanding of product. If you flip the lesson, you actually have students do the work before you come to class. And when you get to class, that's when you collaborate on the product. So that's what I pitched. I thought this would be great for pre-service teachers in their placements. So I did a needs assessment and a gap analysis here. I talked to the client about a constructivist framework for design. So speaking of modeling, sharing, guiding, and allowing students to eventually become independent with their learning. I wanted to deal with environment, content, process, and product using an activity where I would model a football lesson and then move that beyond the modeling point to actually allowing teachers the free rein to create their own resource that could be combined in the end with other colleagues when they return to the classroom. So I began with the PowerPoint, and this is where it ended up. So here are my objectives. So use interest inventories to pinpoint students' interest and build folders, co-create products, redesign environments. I wanted this to be as attractive as the name sounds. So if you have a look, we'll talk about how, if we can analyze this photograph, it really does illustrate the fact that we are all different and we are all coming from a different background, or we all feel as if maybe we have a different purpose in this profession, in this classroom, but coming together, we can collaborate and bring our unique interests to the table. That's where I moved to an interest inventory. So this is a personal learner profile, and you can see it addresses our 4 objective subtopics. So environment, content, process, and product. Basically, I have the learners complete the activity and then think about how this might work in their classroom setting. It's very applicable. Using some of the slides. So here's a slide from the PowerPoint, from the original PowerPoint, and then I've introduced a graphic organizer. Now this graphical organizer talks about 3 types of different texts that could point back to one subject. So the one subject of football will have 3 texts included. So the first is a graphical text, the next is a textual text, and then finally a video or audio text. Now if you think about it, any subject that you choose can have these 3 genres of text attached to them. And that's how I've planned to show the learner what differentiation looks like in a classroom, but also what it feels like, because you actually get to choose the topic you would like to work on. Next, I ask learners to think about how they might demonstrate their learning using a pedagogy wheel. So here's the pedagogy wheel that has all of the iPad apps attached to the Bloom's taxonomy categories. So here's my lesson. So football text number 1, 2, and 3. And then what I've done to model the lesson is I have actually completed my own form. So main information points are here for each text. And then what I want to know more about is below. And finally, demonstrating your learning. So I've suggested one plan to demonstrate the learning. I created a graphical pictograph using PictoChart, and these are 3 tips for choosing resources. So it's just a reminder to teachers to think about the learners, download videos and audio to avoid buffering, and also to give credit to the source, which we know is very important. Basically, after that, we talk about the streaming, banding, setting the 3 groups of students in relation to our own selves as learners. So when you were a student, how did you learn, and what was important for you? So basically that's it. I really enjoyed this project and hope to continue to work with my fine mentor, Neil, and I really appreciate all of the time and effort that went into helping me accomplish these goals. Thank you.